For more, let's go to Eric Ham, CTV News political analyst. Eric, okay, a historic moment. Now we know what these charges are. What more are we learning? What can you tell us?
Well, the indictment has been unsealed and it reads like a story. It tells a narrative of how we got here. It tells the story of how Donald Trump not only absconded with these documents from the White House, but how he actually methodically and strategically went about concealing and hiding the fact that he had these documents, not just from the Justice Department, but also from his own attorneys, and how he enlisted the help of one of his aides in doing so. And of course, it lays out pictures and details, including audio, as well as conversations that were memorialized again by his attorneys. And so this is a very damning indictment of the former president, and it's going to be really interesting to see how Donald Trump, particularly his lawyers, mount a defense against what is so stark in this indictment. And finally, I'll say we have heard Donald Trump talk about these documents, saying that as president, he had the right to declassify these documents and he had every right to have these documents. But when we read the indictment, we see Donald Trump, in his own words, making clear that he not only did not have the right to these documents, but that the documents themselves were not declassified and should not have been seen by others, which is clear in this indictment.
Right, and we also have a quote here of what Trump said, according to his lawyers. I don't want anybody looking. I don't want anybody looking through my boxes. I really don't. I don't want you looking through my boxes. He, also in the indictment, it details where some of these documents were allegedly found: bathroom, shower, ballroom, office, storage room, a bedroom. Talk to us a little bit more about how this looks to the American public now, because of course he is running for president once again.
That's right. And early in this indictment, we see some of the most secretive and very important agencies where these documents emanate from. We see the Defense Department, the CIA, and other organizations, defense and national intelligence agencies, and also the documents themselves and the information that they contain. Military secrets regarding to the United States, military secrets regarding to foreign nations. In fact, there are documents that are eyes only for just a handful of countries: the United States, Australia, the UK, and others. And what we're seeing here is these documents not only contain the most secretive information of the United States, but it's also information that is deemed to be vulnerable if actually made public or placed in the wrong hands. And we look at one of these pictures where we see the documents seem to have spilled over on the floor, and they're just in Donald Trump's golf club. And it's just very striking. And one other thing that I'll add, because now we're learning about the judge and that this case is going to be assigned in the state of Florida. And it's important to note, because many look at this and think that this case it might be advantageous to Donald Trump because now he makes Florida his home and he won the state of Florida twice and Florida is seen as a red state. All of that is true. But we have to remember that they were able to get an indictment, to get a grand jury to indict Donald Trump. And these were grand jurors who reside from the state of Florida.
So then, Eric, do you think that the severity, the seriousness of what has been uncovered here in this indictment, do you think that this will finally be what turns the tide for some members of his base who have stuck through Donald Trump? They've stuck by him through two impeachments, rather, I should say, another criminal case, and now this. Do you think that could change?
I think it's going to be very difficult for some of those MAGA Republicans who support Donald Trump to move away from him, even in light of this information. However, what we know about Donald Trump is he lost the popular vote in 2016, and he lost the popular vote by an even wider margin in 2020. So I think what the severity of this criminal indictment will do is only cause more voters to move away, not towards Donald Trump. And I think that is something that the Republican Party is going to have to reckon with when they decide who will be their nominee.
Okay. Eric Ham, CTV News political analyst, joining us on this. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you.